found his neighbor's abandoned bride freezing in a blizzard. What he did next shocked the town. Icicles hung from roofs like crystal daggers, and the paths were buried under layers of white that seemed endless. In the middle of this storm, the forest stood silent, its trees heavy with snow, branches creaking under the weight. Eamon pulled his thick cloak tighter around his shoulders, his boots crunching through the snow as he walked toward the edge of the forest. He had noticed the storm rising faster than usual that day, dark clouds rolling over the hills, and a sense of unease had settled over him. There was something about the wind tonight that whispered warnings, carrying secrets he could not understand. As he approached a narrow clearing, a movement caught his eye. At first it seemed like a trick of the snow and shadows, but then he saw her, a woman lying face down in the snow, her white gown stained and frozen. She shivered violently, teeth chattering, and her hair, dark as night, was plastered to her pale skin. Eamon's heart leapt. Without a second thought, he ran toward her, feeling the cold bite through his gloves. "Hey, are you all right?" he shouted over the roar of the wind. The woman stirred, but her movements were weak, almost lifeless. She tried to rise, but the snow refused to let her, holding her in a frozen grip. Eamon knelt beside her, brushing snow from her face. Her eyes opened slowly, gray and frightened, yet defiant. I'm fine," she whispered, though her lips were blue and trembling. Eamon shook his head, ignoring her words. "No, you're not. You're freezing. Come with me. I'll get you somewhere warm." She hesitated, glancing around at the endless white, her gaze distant. "I can't, I should," she murmured, but the frost in her breath betrayed her. Eamon pressed gently on her shoulders. "It doesn't matter who you are or why you're here. You can't survive out here alone. Trust me." For a moment she stared into his eyes as if weighing a life against her pride. Then, shivering, she allowed him to lift her. Her arms clung weakly to his neck, her weight almost too light, and Eamon held her close, careful not to jostle her too much. Each step through the snow was a battle. The storm seemed determined to push them back. The forest around them was alive with strange sounds, the groaning of trees, the distant howl of wolves, and the whispering wind that seemed almost like voices. Eamon's mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why was she abandoned here in the blizzard? And why did his heart feel so tightly bound to a stranger in the midst of danger? Hours passed, or it felt like hours, before the edge of the forest gave way to a small clearing where a cabin stood, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. Eamon's relief was profound. He pushed open the door, warm light spilling into the cold night. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine wood and fire, simple but comforting. He placed her gently on a chair near the hearth. She shivered uncontrollably, and he knelt beside her, rubbing her hands to restore warmth. "We'll get you dried off, then you can rest," he said softly. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, her gaze wary. Why help me?" Eamon paused. His eyes met hers. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the snow. That's all the reason I need." For the first time she allowed herself a small nod, but her eyes remained guarded. Eamon worked quickly, removing the wet layers of her dress and wrapping her in thick blankets. He fetched hot tea, though she sipped it cautiously, unsure of him or herself. As she warmed, her story began to emerge, though in fragments. Her name was Lyra, and she had been left at the edge of the village during the storm by the man she was meant to marry. He had abandoned her without explanation, leaving her to face the blizzard alone. Her words were quiet, tinged with shame and disbelief. He said I was cursed, that my presence would bring misfortune, and then he left me." Eamon's jaw tightened. Rage and pity warred within him. He did not know the man, but he could feel the injustice in the story, sharp as the winter wind. "No one can call another cursed without cause," he said firmly, "and no one deserves to be left to die." Lyra looked away, her fingers clutching the blanket. She had been alone in fear, and the warmth of the cabin was almost painful in contrast to the storm outside. Her pride and her vulnerability collided, creating a tension that Eamon could feel even without words. Hours passed, and the storm outside raged on, relentless. Eamon stayed by her side, watching her, not speaking much. There was a strange comfort in silence, a shared presence that neither had expected. He noticed the small things, the way her hair fell across her forehead, the way her fingers trembled slightly even when wrapped in blankets, the shadows under her eyes that told stories of a night spent alone in terror. "Why did he leave you?" Eamon asked finally, his voice low, more to himself than to her. Lyra hesitated, biting her lip. I don't know. Something about a curse, something old and I can't explain." Her voice faltered and she looked down at her hands. "I tried to be brave, I tried to follow him, but the snow, it's alive in some way. It wanted me gone." Eamon frowned, not fully understanding, but the fire in her eyes told him that she had suffered greatly. He did not need magic or curses to know that pain like hers was real. He offered a hand, careful and steady. "You're safe now. No snow, no wind, no man can hurt you here, not while I'm around." For a long time she did not respond. Then slowly she placed her hand in his. It was a tentative gesture, but it held more weight than any words could convey. It was trust, fragile and fragile as the ice outside, yet unmistakable. The storm continued through the night, but the cabin held warmth and light. Eamon and Lyra remained close, sharing quiet words, sharing the small comforts of food and fire. He learned of her fears, her doubts, her sense of betrayal. She learned of his solitude, of a life spent in the quiet woods, of a heart that knew duty, courage, and unexpected compassion. As dawn approached, the storm began to soften, snow falling more gently, a muted light filtering through the frost-covered windows. But even as the morning arrived, questions remained. Why had her fiancé abandoned her? Why had he claimed she was cursed? And what, if anything, would come for her now after surviving the blizzard? Lyra's eyes fell on Eamon, and for the first time a shadow of doubt left her gaze. She wanted to speak, to ask him why he had cared so much, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she murmured a single name, almost inaudible above the wind. "Gareth." Eamon froze. He knew that name. It belonged to a man with a reputation as cruel as he was proud. A man who ruled not just with wealth, but with fear. A man who had caused the village to whisper tales of curses, betrayal, and abandoned love. The realization hit Eamon like a strike of lightning. Lyra's abandonment had not been a mere accident. Someone powerful, dangerous, and cold-hearted had left her to die, and now she was in his care. He could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He looked at her, eyes steady and determined. "No one will harm you here," he said firmly. "Not now, not ever." Lyra's gaze met his, a flicker of fear, hope, and something else. Something unspoken, fragile, and dangerous shimmering in her gray eyes. And outside, in the clearing where the snow still fell silently, a shadow moved. A figure cloaked in white watched the cabin from the edge of the forest, hidden in the drifts. Eyes cold and calculating, it lingered, a silent reminder that the storm was not the only danger waiting for them. Eamon did not see it. Lyra did not see it. But both would soon learn that survival was only the beginning, and that the world beyond the storm held darker, more complicated trials than frost and wind. For now, though, in the warmth of the cabin, they simply breathed. For the first time in many nights, there was warmth, a fragile thread of trust, and a quiet hope that even in a frozen world, two hearts could begin to beat in rhythm with one another. And as the snow fell outside, silent and endless, the story of the abandoned bride and the woodsman who saved her was only just beginning. The blizzard had softened by morning, leaving the village under a blanket of silence and snow. Icicles glimmered in the pale sun like shards of crystal, and the trees were bowed under heavy white coats. Inside Eamon's cabin, the fire crackled, casting long shadows on the wooden walls. The warmth was comforting, yet it did little to chase away the unease that lingered in the air. Lyra sat on a chair near the hearth, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her hair, still damp from the storm, curled loosely around her face. She watched the flames, eyes distant, lost in memories of the night she had been abandoned. The fire's glow highlighted the subtle lines of exhaustion and fear on her face, though she tried to hide them behind a mask of composure. Eamon sat across from her, sharpening an old knife he had carried for years. The steady rhythm of his movements was a contrast to the storm that still raged in her mind. He glanced up occasionally, noticing the way she drew the blanket tighter around her shoulders, the way her eyes followed every movement in the cabin with careful suspicion. "You should eat," he said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low, steady, carrying an authority that was both comforting and firm. Lyra shook her head. "I'm not hungry." Her words were polite, but there was an underlying tremor that betrayed her fatigue. Eamon set the knife down and rose, retrieving a small bowl of porridge from the shelf. He stirred it carefully, the aroma filling the cabin with warmth. "You need strength," he said simply. "Even if you don't feel like it, your body does." She hesitated, then reached for the bowl, her fingers brushing his briefly. The touch was fleeting, but it left a strange warmth that neither of them could ignore. Lyra lowered her gaze, unwilling to meet his eyes, but something unspoken passed between them. Trust, fragile and delicate, had begun to take root. As she ate slowly, Eamon spoke softly. "You told me your fiancé left you. Why, what did he say?" Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she held the spoon. He said I was cursed," she admitted. "That my presence would bring misfortune. And then he left me. He didn't even wait for the storm to pass. He just abandoned me." Her voice faltered and she looked away, ashamed and angry at the same time. Eamon's jaw tightened. Rage simmered beneath his calm exterior, but he held it in check. "Cursed? That's a lie," he said firmly. "No person can be cursed without reason, and no one deserves to be left to die because of fear or greed." Lyra's gaze flicked to him, and for a moment the firelight reflected a glimmer of hope in her gray eyes. "Do you believe me?" she asked softly. Eamon nodded. "I believe you, and I'll do whatever I can to protect you." The words seemed to surprise her. She had been alone for so long, abandoned and betrayed, that trust felt impossible. Yet in the quiet warmth of the cabin, with the storm outside now only a whisper, she felt the first flicker of safety in days. Hours passed, and the two of them remained near the fire, speaking in low tones. Eamon learned fragments of her story, how her fiancé had become cruel and distant, how he had whispered of ancient curses and old magic, and how the villagers had begun to gossip about her misfortune. Each word added weight to the fear she carried, yet it also strengthened the bond forming between them. "You shouldn't have been left out there," Eamon said finally, his voice low but firm. "It was not just cruel, it was dangerous. Anyone could have seen the blizzard and thought you lost, but you survived." Lyra swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. I didn't think I would," she admitted. "The snow, it was alive. I could feel it closing in around me, pushing me, holding me down. I thought I would die." Eamon reached across the small table and placed his hand over hers. The touch was gentle, grounding. "You didn't die," he said, "and you won't, not while I'm here." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to breathe without fear. The warmth from the fire and the steadiness of Eamon's presence began to melt the ice around her heart. She wanted to trust him, to lean on him, yet the memory of betrayal lingered like a shadow she could not shake. As night fell, the cabin grew quiet. The wind outside howled softly, a distant reminder of the storm that had passed. Eamon stoked the fire, sending sparks dancing into the air, while Lyra sat in contemplation, wrapped in blankets. Suddenly, her voice broke the silence. "Eamon, what if he comes back?" Eamon froze, the firelight flickering across his determined face. "Who?" he asked, cautious yet steady. "My fiancé, Gareth," she said, the name falling like a stone into the room. Her eyes darted toward the window, imagining him riding through the snow, claiming her again. "What if he finds me?" Eamon stood and moved closer to her. Then we will face him, he said. Together. Lyra's eyes widened. Together, she repeated, uncertain. You would fight him. You don't even know him. Eamon shook his head. I don't need to know him. I only need to know that he will not hurt you. Her gaze lingered on him, and for a long moment the cabin was silent except for the fire. The trust between them had grown, tentative but undeniable. Yet even as warmth settled over them, a sense of unease lingered. The village had not seen Lyra since she was abandoned. Gossip would spread quickly. Fear and suspicion would follow her, especially if she reappeared with someone like Eamon, an outsider who lived at the edge of the forest, away from the watchful eyes of neighbors. Lyra finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think they will believe me, that I am not cursed? Eamon crouched beside her, looking her directly in the eyes. I don't care what they believe, he said firmly. I know the truth. And the truth is, you are not cursed, you are strong. You survived the storm when no one else could. She wanted to believe him, but the fear lingered. And if they don't believe me, then we will show them, he replied. But first, we need to be ready. You must regain your strength, and we must understand what we are facing. There is more to this than just a storm or a cruel man. I can feel it. Something unnatural watches over you even now. Lyra shivered, though the fire had warmed her body. Unnatural? She asked, her voice trembling. Eamon nodded. Yes, there is a presence in the forest. I've felt it before, watching from the shadows. It is not human and it is patient. It waits for weakness. Lyra's hands tightened around the blanket. Fear, that old, familiar companion, crept back into her chest. What does it want? Eamon did not answer immediately. He gazed into the fire, weighing his words. I don't know yet, he admitted. But whatever it is, we will face it together. The silence that followed was heavy but comforting. Lyra felt a strange warmth at his words, a promise that even in a world full of danger and betrayal, someone would stand beside her. Hours passed, and the cabin grew darker as night deepened. Eamon stoked the fire again, sending sparks dancing like tiny stars into the shadows. Lyra watched them, her mind a whirlwind of fear, curiosity, and something else, something she could not yet name. Finally, she spoke again. Eamon, why did you help me? You didn't have to. He paused, leaning back against the table. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply, and because I could not stand by and let you die. No one deserves that. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the storm outside seemed distant and meaningless. She wanted to trust him fully, to lean on him and let the warmth of the cabin and his presence chase away the cold she had carried for so long. But even as the night deepened, a shadow lingered. Outside, in the trees at the edge of the forest, eyes watched the cabin silently. A figure moved among the snowdrifts, cloaked in white, a whisper against the wind. It was silent, patient, and unseen, yet it carried a threat that neither Lyra nor Eamon could yet understand. Lyra shivered, pulling the blanket tighter. Eamon, I feel like we are being watched, she said, her voice small. Eamon rose, moving to the window. His eyes scanned the forest, but all was still and white. Perhaps it is only the memory of the storm, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. Or perhaps something else. Lyra nodded slowly, unsure if she should believe him. The warmth of the cabin could not chase away the chill of fear entirely. Yet for the first time she felt that she was not alone. She had someone who would fight for her, someone who would stand by her side no matter the danger. And in the quiet of the cabin, with the fire flickering and the snow falling softly outside, a bond began to form, fragile, delicate, but undeniable. For now, the storm had passed, but the dangers of the world beyond the cabin were only beginning to reveal themselves. The shadow in the forest waited, patient and silent, and the night stretched long and uncertain before them. The morning after the storm, the village awoke under a cold, gray sky. Snow lay thick across rooftops and streets, and the footprints of those who had ventured out were already covered by fresh drifts. Villagers whispered as they passed, glancing toward the forest where the storm had raged the night before. Rumors traveled faster than the snowflakes. The abandoned bride had survived. Some spoke of miracles, others murmured of curses. Eamon's cabin stood at the forest's edge, small and unassuming, yet its warmth and light were like a beacon in the gray landscape. Inside, the fire crackled, and the scent of pine smoke mixed with the faint aroma of breakfast. Lyra sat near the hearth, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her eyes distant as she listened to the world outside. Eamon moved about the cabin quietly, preparing food and checking supplies. His mind, however, was elsewhere. He had sensed a presence in the forest during the night, a feeling that something, or someone, was watching them. The shadow had not left, and he feared that the storm had only revealed it, not dispelled it. "Eamon," Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Do you feel it too?" He turned to her, concern creasing his brow. "Feel what?" "The presence, the one in the forest." "I think it followed me." Her gray eyes held fear, but also a strange determination. "It feels alive, like it's waiting for something." Eamon nodded slowly. "I felt it last night. Something watches, but it hasn't acted yet." Lyra shivered, though the fire had warmed her body. "Do you think it is a curse?" Eamon paused. He did not answer immediately, choosing his words with care. "I do not know," he said finally. "But I know this: fear alone cannot hurt you. Only the actions of those who wish you harm can." Outside, snowflakes drifted silently, falling upon the village as if nothing had happened. Yet inside the cabin, tension hung like the storm clouds that had passed. The peaceful morning was a fragile illusion, one that Eamon knew could shatter at any moment. Hours later, a knock came at the cabin door. Eamon moved quickly, opening it to reveal a messenger from the village. The man was pale and nervous, clutching a folded note in his hands. "It's from the council," the messenger said, voice trembling. "They want to speak with you and the girl." Eamon took the note, reading it carefully. It was a summons. Lyra was to appear before the village elders to explain herself. Rumors of curses, of abandonment, and of strange happenings had reached them, and they demanded answers. Lyra's hands tightened around the blanket. They will not understand. They will judge me," she whispered. Fear and anger mingled in her voice. "I have survived everything, and now I must face them." Eamon placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will face them together," he said firmly. "You have done nothing wrong. Do not let fear decide for you." Reluctantly, Lyra nodded. She dressed carefully, the firelight reflecting off her hair like strands of silver. Together, they left the cabin, walking through the snow-covered forest toward the village. Each step was measured, careful, as if the forest itself might shift and reveal the hidden dangers Eamon had felt. The village square was quiet when they arrived. Villagers gathered in small groups, watching with wary eyes. Murmurs followed them, questions half-spoken, accusations unspoken but felt in the weight of every gaze. Lyra's heart raced as she stepped onto the cobblestones, and Eamon's presence beside her offered a small but steady reassurance. The council of elders awaited them at the center of the square, their faces stern, their eyes sharp. Gareth's name was not spoken aloud, but the tension in the air suggested that some feared he might appear at any moment. "Lyra," the head elder began, his voice grave, "we have heard troubling tales. That you were abandoned in the forest, that you survived a blizzard unscathed, and that strange occurrences have followed you. Tell us, child, what is the truth?" Lyra swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. Eamon squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise of support. She drew a deep breath. "I was abandoned," she said simply, her voice firm despite the fear in her heart. "I survived the storm with the help of Eamon. There is no curse on me, only fear and the cruelty of those who sought to see me suffer." The council murmured among themselves. Some believed her, others, skeptical, shook their heads. One elder, a thin man with piercing eyes, stepped forward. "And this Eamon, you claim he saved you. From what?" "From the blizzard," Eamon said firmly. "From being left to die, that is the truth." the elder frowned. And yet rumors persist. People say the forest is restless, that strange figures watch from the shadows, that those who touch the girl are changed. Eamon met the elder's gaze, steady and unwavering. I have seen no change beyond what fear can create, he said. Do not mistake courage and survival for something unnatural. Lyra's heart fluttered. She had spoken the truth, and Eamon's words gave her strength. Yet the whispers among the villagers reminded her that belief alone would not protect her. Fear, once sown, could spread like wildfire. The council deliberated, their voices low. Finally, the head elder spoke. "We will watch," he said. "But know this, if misfortune follows, it will be on your own heads." Lyra nodded, a mixture of relief and unease washing over her. She had survived the council's judgment, but the tension in the air remained. Outside the square, the forest loomed, a silent sentinel. As they returned to the cabin, Lyra spoke softly. "Eamon, do you think the curse is real?" Eamon shook his head, though he did not look certain. "I do not know, but I know this. Someone wants you to believe it is. And until we understand why, we must be cautious." That night the wind rose again, carrying whispers through the trees. Eamon kept watch by the window, eyes scanning the forest for signs of movement. Lyra sat near the fire, wrapped in blankets, her thoughts a mix of fear and wonder. She had survived the storm, the abandonment, and the council's suspicion, but she sensed that a greater challenge awaited. Hours passed, and just as she began to drift into a restless sleep, a shadow moved outside the window. Eamon noticed it instantly, stepping quietly to the door. The figure was cloaked in white, blending with the snow, its presence silent but unnerving. Eamon did not speak immediately. He watched, calculating, waiting. The figure lingered at the edge of the forest, then vanished, leaving only the impression of eyes that had seen everything. Lyra awoke fully, her fear rising. "Eamon, it's back," she whispered. He nodded. "Yes. But it is patient. It watches, waiting for weakness." Fear and determination mingled in her chest. She realized that survival was not enough. She had been abandoned once, but now, with Eamon by her side, she would confront whatever awaited them. Days passed, and the shadow continued its silent observation. The village remained wary, and Gareth's presence, though unseen, was a threat that lingered like the frost. Lyra and Eamon trained themselves for what was to come, learning to trust each other completely. They ventured into the forest cautiously, gathering herbs and supplies. Eamon teaching Lyra how to read signs in the snow, how to move silently, and how to sense danger before it arrived. Each lesson strengthened their bond, each shared moment building trust, courage, and understanding. One evening, as they returned from the forest, Lyra paused, looking back at the dark line of trees. "Do you think it's following us?" Eamon placed a hand on her shoulder. "Perhaps. But we will face it together. Nothing in this world can break what we have started to build." Lyra looked into his eyes, and for the first time, the fear of the unknown did not paralyze her. She felt strength in his presence, hope in their unity, and determination to confront the dangers that awaited. Yet the shadow was patient. It waited. And somewhere beyond the trees, eyes watched, calculating, knowing that the next trial would test not just their courage, but their hearts. The wind had grown colder, sharper, cutting through the forest like blades of ice. Snow swirled in thick, blinding sheets, and the trees bent under the weight of winter's fury. Yet amidst this frozen chaos, Eamon and Lyra moved with purpose, their steps careful, their hearts steady. The forest seemed alive with whispers, shadows moving at the edges of their vision. Eamon's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife, though he had not faced human enemies in years. Lyra's grip tightened around the bundle of herbs she carried, her gray eyes scanning the trees, alert to every movement. "It's here," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. "I can feel it. The shadow, it waits for us." Eamon nodded. "Stay close. Whatever this is, it cannot stand against our courage. Together, we are stronger than fear." They followed a narrow path deeper into the forest, snow crunching beneath their boots. The trees grew taller, older, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Every step seemed to draw them closer to the heart of the storm, and to the shadow that had haunted them since the blizzard. Finally, they reached a small clearing, the center marked by a circle of frozen stones. In the middle lay a pedestal, carved with strange symbols, frost and snow clinging to its surface. The air felt heavier here, charged with an energy that made the hairs on their arms stand on end. Eamon placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "This must be it," he said. "The source of the presence we felt. Be ready for anything." Lyra nodded, though her heart raced. I don't know what to expect." Before he could answer, a cold wind swirled around them, and the shadow emerged from the edges of the clearing. It was humanoid in shape but ever-shifting, made of darkness and frost, with eyes that glowed faintly like embers beneath the snow. It moved with patience and intent, circling them as if testing their resolve. "Do not fear it," Eamon said softly. "Fear gives it power. Stand together and it cannot touch us." Lyra swallowed, focusing on his words. "I trust you," she whispered. The shadow's voice drifted across the clearing, carried by the wind. It was hollow, echoing, yet filled with the weight of centuries. "You should not have come," it said. "She is mine, abandoned, cursed, bound by fear. You cannot save her." Eamon stepped forward. "She is not cursed, and she is not yours to claim. Leave us or face the consequences." The shadow moved closer, its form shifting and swirling like a living storm. Snow and frost whipped around them, and the temperature dropped sharply, biting at their skin. Lyra's teeth chattered, and she wrapped her arms around herself, but she held her ground, bolstered by Eamon's steady presence. "You must understand," the shadow said, its voice almost gentle yet terrifying. "She carries a power she does not know. Abandonment, betrayal, and fear have shaped her, and now she is mine to test." Lyra's hands shook, but her voice was firm. "You are wrong. I am not yours. I am free to choose my life, and I choose to live, to fight, and to trust." The shadow paused, as if considering her words. Then it surged forward, a wave of cold energy crashing against them. Eamon braced himself, holding Lyra close, shielding her from the worst of it. "You cannot protect her forever," the shadow hissed, circling them again. "The curse will awaken." Eamon met its gaze. "Perhaps, but we will face it together. Your threats mean nothing against courage and love." Lyra felt a warmth in his words that pushed back against the cold. The fear that had haunted her for weeks, the fear of abandonment, of betrayal, of the unknown, began to loosen its grip. She realized something powerful. She did not have to be alone. Eamon's presence, steady and unwavering, gave her strength. The shadow lunged again, and this time Lyra stepped forward. "I am not afraid of you," she cried, her voice ringing through the clearing. "You do not control me." The snow and wind seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if the forest itself held its breath. Eamon looked at her, pride and relief shining in his eyes. "Good," he said. "Hold that feeling. It is your power." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth in her chest, on the courage that had grown with every trial she had faced. The shadow shrieked, a sound like cracking ice, and recoiled as if her defiance had struck it. "You are strong," it hissed. "Stronger than I expected. But to break the curse, one must give a piece of themselves. One must surrender fear, pride, and doubt." Eamon took her hand. "Then we surrender them together," he said. "Whatever this requires, we will face it side by side." Lyra nodded, feeling the bond between them solidify into something unbreakable. They stepped into the center of the stone circle together, hands intertwined, hearts beating in unison. The shadow surged again, a vortex of wind and frost, yet they did not flinch. Instead, Lyra focused on her memories, not of fear but of courage. Not of abandonment but of trust. Not of betrayal but of love. The warmth inside her expanded, pushing outward, and for the first time the shadow faltered. Eamon's voice rang out, firm and steady. "You cannot claim her. She is free, and I will not let you harm her." The shadow shrieked. the sound echoing through the forest like a breaking storm. Snow swirled violently, but Lyra and Eamon held firm, standing together. And then, as if a wave had broken, the shadow collapsed, dissolving into the cold air, leaving only silence and stillness in the clearing. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Eamon knelt beside her, wrapping her in his cloak. "It's over," he said softly. "The shadow is gone, you are safe." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, not of fear but of relief. "We did it," she whispered. We faced it." Eamon smiled gently, brushing snow from her hair. "Yes, together." They remained in the clearing for a while, letting the silence and the calm after the storm settle over them. The forest, once foreboding and cold, now seemed peaceful, as if acknowledging the courage and unity they had shown. When they finally returned to the village, the people were wary at first, but soon whispers of their courage began to spread. They had faced a force that none had dared to confront, and yet they had returned, alive and unbroken. The village slowly came to respect them, not just for survival but for their bravery and the bond that had grown between them. Days turned to weeks, and the village thawed from the long winter. Lyra and Eamon worked together, helping others and rebuilding trust. The bond between them deepened, no longer just of reliance but of love and mutual respect. Lyra found courage she had never known, and Eamon found a companion who matched his strength, heart for heart. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink, Lyra and Eamon walked through the forest together. The wind was gentle, the snow soft beneath their feet, and the trees whispered softly as if congratulating them on their victory. Lyra looked at Eamon, her eyes filled with gratitude and something more profound, love steady and unwavering. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for saving me, for trusting me, and for staying." Eamon smiled, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "I did what was right," he said, "and I'll continue to do what is right as long as we face it together." The shadow of the past, the storm, and the curse had all faded. In their place was something stronger, courage, trust, and a bond forged in adversity. The village, the forest, and even the frozen stones of the clearing seemed to acknowledge it. Yet as they walked back toward the warmth of their cabin, a gentle wind stirred the trees. It was soft, almost playful, carrying no threat. But it reminded them that the world was vast, full of unknowns, and that their journey, though victorious, was only one chapter in a much larger story. Lyra squeezed Eamon's hand. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." Eamon nodded. "Always together." And with that, they stepped forward, side by side, hearts bound by trials, love, and courage, leaving the shadows behind and embracing a future where warmth and trust could grow even in the coldest places. The snow fell gently around them, silent and pure, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt at peace.